Hey, welcome to Grep News. I'm Bam Rather. Today we're digging into a primetime White House address about election fraud, one where the president released the supporting documents himself, and those documents argue back. Stick with me because this one unravels fast. There's a line sitting on the White House website right now, in a document the president himself chose to declassify and publish, and it says the quiet part out loud. The document notes that China targeted the Biden campaign and did not currently intend to covertly interfere to try and sway the outcome of the election. Read that again. The president spent a primetime address arguing that China stole the election for Joe Biden, and the very evidence he released to prove it says China wasn't trying to change the result at all. He built the case. He handed us the file, and the file disagrees with him. That's the shape of this whole story, so let me walk you through how a speech designed to be a bombshell became, within about 90 minutes, a self-refuting document. The claim, delivered from the White House in primetime, was big. Newly declassified intelligence, the president said, proved the 2020 election was stolen through Chinese interference. The headline number? China illicitly acquired 220 million American voter files. And in the version he told, this was raw FBI reporting from 2020, buried by rogue bureaucrats. That even included, in his words, an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden. Startling, if true. Here's where I started pulling the timeline. Because that 220 million figure, it isn't new. China's harvesting of more than 200 million voter records across 18 states was documented during Trump's first term. It was briefed to him. It was published in the declassified intelligence assessment that came out after he'd already left office. And that same assessment stated, without hedging, that no foreign actor altered any technical aspect of the 2020 vote. So the suppressed revelation is recycled intelligence that was public years ago, reframed as a thing somebody hid in a vault. And then there's the data itself. Multiple outlets that reviewed the documents reached the same conclusion. The voter files China supposedly acquired were largely public. You could buy them online. Voter rolls are, in many states, a commercial product. So the largest compromise of election data in history is, in significant part, a description of information that was already for sale. Now, the fact checks. This is the part that reads less like journalism and more like a live demolition. A former Republican election lawyer, a man who worked for the RNC in a Bush campaign, watched the speech and said what stood out to him was that there's still no evidence of any election result being incorrect. A CNN reporter noted that none of the declassified information supports the claim that any previous election was manipulated by foreign interference in a way that changed the outcome. And a former Homeland Security chief of staff, responding to the deep state hid this from me narrative, pointed out that he had personally briefed Trump on the Chinese threat and added, with what I can only describe as professional exasperation, that it's a big mistake to make claims living humans can refute. The living humans, it turns out, were available for comment, and it gets worse for the case, not better. On the smaller claims, the numbers wobble. Trump said 250,000 non-citizens were found on the voting rolls. Better government sources, per CNN's reporting, put the figure closer to 28,000. That's not a rounding error, that's off by a factor of nearly 9. On Venezuela, he cited a CIA report to allege digital rigging, but the report itself said it did not definitively confirm that large-scale electronic fraud was successfully executed. One source's assessment was that Maduro did not need to resort to gross fraud because the opposition boycotted. So the document he cited to prove fraud specifically declines to confirm fraud. I want to be precise about one thing, because it's the most damning fact in the brief, and it comes from a single outlet. According to The Atlantic, a White House official said that after reviewing millions of documents, investigators had found no evidence to support the fraud claims. If that reporting holds, and I'd want it confirmed against a second source before I'd carve it in stone, then the administration knew the case was empty while the president was walking to the podium. Here's the tension underneath the absurdity, and it's the part that isn't funny. Trump now controls the intelligence community, and he is using that machinery, the FBI, the CIA, the classification stamp, to manufacture proof of a conspiracy that this same community has repeatedly assessed did not happen. a former intelligence officer, someone who used to brief the president's daily brief, put it this way: "I have never seen raw, unverified reporting pushed out this way, harvested for the pieces that fit, fashioned into a weapon against American elections." That is the mechanism, not analysis, cherry picking with a government seal. Which brings us to the question that actually matters. If his own investigators told him there was no evidence, and his own released documents contradict his thesis, what is the speech for? The reporting points toward one answer: the November midterms. Analysts read this as preemptive delegitimization, laying the groundwork to reject unfavorable results before a single vote is counted. The legislative vehicle riding alongside it is the Save America Act, proof of citizenship and voter ID requirements, currently stalled because the Senate Majority Leader has resisted White House pressure to blow up the chamber's own rules to pass it. And here's the irony a Republican lawyer flagged, the one I can't stop thinking about. In this second term, Trump gutted the federal election security programs, the CISA and DOJ initiatives built to defend against exactly the kind of foreign interference he's now warning about. So if there's a real vulnerability in the 2026 elections, the person most responsible for it may be the man at the podium. He dismantled the smoke detectors and is now yelling about arson. Let me note what's missing, because the gaps tell you something too. Not one state election official is quoted in this coverage, and they're the people who actually run elections and would receive Trump's promised information sharing. No sitting Democratic official is quoted either. The opposition here comes almost entirely from journalists and ex-officials. China's response is a single-line denial, and the full document set, beyond the passages fact-checkers grabbed, hasn't been read publicly in its entirety. Somebody should download all of it and read every page. That's the next real story. One more detail, and it's the tell. When the president went to give this address, two major networks, ABC and NBC, declined to air it live. Fox, the network that paid Dominion Voting Systems $787.5 million to settle a defamation suit over rigged machine claims, gave the speech just over 5 minutes before pivoting to Iran. When even Fox checks its watch, the room is telling you something. So return to that line on the White House website, the one the president declassified himself. China does not currently intend to covertly interfere to try and sway the outcome of the election. At the start of this, it looked like a footnote. Now it looks like the whole verdict, written in the government's own hand and posted by the defendant. Here's what we know now that we didn't before. The strongest witness against the president's fraud case is the president's own evidence, and he published it. The one thread worth watching isn't whether new proof emerges, because his own investigators reportedly already looked and found none. It's whether this speech, empty as a legal document, gets converted into an operational tool against the midterm results this fall. He announced no such steps, not yet. But he built the predicate in prime time, on camera, with the documents that disagree with him stapled to the back. Thanks for listening to Grep News. I'm Bam Rather. If this episode gave you something to chew on, share it with someone who's still reading the headlines and not the footnotes. We'll be back soon.
Grep News. Thomas.